The Trade Union Congress. Recently, we had an increment in tariffs, etc. They are saying that it's ill time, it's insensitive, etc. But if we have to take a look at how power or energy is generated, and you foremost, I've been in the industry and you know a lot more. We're always told they're generating under several constraints. And so ECG comes and VRA and the other power producers have difficulties producing power. The consumer is the ultimate to pay.
I do not understand why government cannot put pressure on ECG to make sure that they manage ECG well.
What can ECG do?
The problem with ECG is management. That's the problem. Look, if we sit and we don't increase these prices, we'll be sitting here and we'll all be out of work because there will be no electricity.
I don't get you.
At the present moment, when you look at how much money is required to get electricity into this, let's say this studio, or into Ghana, we don't have it. Where are we going to get the money? We would have to get the money out of the people. If we don't do that, government does not have the money to invest into these generation plants. If we don't get it from the people, where are we going to get it from? It will grind to a halt. You see, the Bui Dam, which I'm sorry to say, which should have been in place over 46 years ago, is now in place. We thank God for that. But what is the Bui Dam? It's a peaking dam. It only comes on during times when we need extra, what do you call it? How does that help us? How does that help us? How does that help us? And Osajifo himself, who built Akosombo, he knew Akosombo would not take us for 50 years. So he brought in what? An atomic reactor, looking at other forms of energy. How long has it taken us to look at other forms of energy? Even the thermal plant. When we built it, didn't we realize that we could have converted it to gas then? Wasn't that done recently? And as Matthew is saying, look at our gas infrastructure at the present moment. We are losing a lot of money because we do not have gas running through our gas infrastructure. At the present moment, the oil companies who are supposed to give us the gas, they are realizing that they've done a big mistake. So within themselves, they are creating havoc for us. We are sitting and we are not even looking at that at the present moment. Look, not unless we Ghanaians take control of the resources we have, we will be chasing our tail every day.
And so if the TUC says we are left to think that the only reasons for this facile reflex of simply increasing the prices without regard to the plight of the Ghanaian people is to take unfair advantage of working people and the weak and vulnerable in society, what do they mean?
I respect the TUC very much. I respect the honorable
prices
men.
Are prices.
I respect the honorable men on the TUC, but there are two members of the TUC on the PRC board. They should make their influence well known on the PRC
Well, they're just
board.
2 out of
2 out of what, 9? 2 out of 7? They make a significant impact. But let me say that another policy that we have to take in this country, policy decision, executive decision we have to take. Electricity can be used for productive uses and it can be used for domestic users. And I think we should separate and keep our hydro for productive uses.
Meaning what? Hydro could be going to industry?
Yeah, they should be going to industry. They should be targeted to industry. Or else we are running around in circles. Look, if the PRC, government was going to take that decision, the PRC's adjusted formula, no country have I been to in Europe that they all have these, that the prices do like go yo-yo.
They fluctuate.
No. Look,
well,
the
what
PRC
do you call it? The automatic adjustment?
I'm coming. If you take hydro out, because hydro gives you a false sense of confidence. Confidence. If you take hydro out, and PRC will stay there, assuming that we are going to use crude for the next year, and crude prices for the last 3 years have been very, very stable. Then we can predict that in the next 6 months, even if we are going to hedge, we can get price stability. If our industry is going to use crude, and Ghanaians are going to pay, this is going to be the price. And Ghanaians might suffer, but we know that for the next year or 6 months, industry, everybody can plan. Now what are we told? The gas is flowing a bit convulsively. It is flowing. They come and tell us, we don't know. The Atuabo project, where the gas or the crude is going to be used, that project, that the whole Atuabo enclave is out, being maintained till end of the month. So why are you using crude price when crude price is stable? How are you using crude price? Let me tell you, maybe they want to do a catch-up. This price increase was not necessary. Again, I think the last time PRC should announce price increase is what they did. PRC doesn't increase price. They agree on the rate. They should allow the utilities to tell Ghanaians so that we can confront the utilities. I have two short points. If ECG, the whole of Abuazi production, ECG wastes on technical and non-technical losses, which are about 28%. It means for every 100 units, you are losing 28%. Which business with that money, when my uncle was talking about that you don't understand, which business will make a profit? See, ECG is just like gold. Why does gold make profit and ECG is always in the loss? Let's think through some of these things. But besides, we are in an international economy. The NDC came to meet dollar at 1.20. They have taken us to 4 cities and brought us down to 3 cities 50 pesos. Every fundamental you plan your economy on cannot be sustained with such sporadic, spasmodic increases in the retracing economy that we are having. That is why our economic managers are fundamental. That is why I have a problem with the Bank of Ghana, because I'm sure they are using their independence in the monetary policy not for the good of this country at all. At all. And we have to look there and see where we can gain some effectiveness and efficiency in the handling of the economy. The Bank of Ghana is bankrupting Ghana, and we have to start thinking about it.
May I ask a question?
As you're asking a question,
is the Nigerian naira linked to the dollar? The Nigerian naira, is it linked to the dollar? When you go,
in terms of
when you go to Nigeria,
its appreciation,
when you go to Nigeria, do you hear them say that if the dollar goes up, we cannot do X or we cannot do Y? Is the Ghana cedi linked?
But in pricing, especially,
please, it is high time we got away from this linking to the dollar.
Yes, but in pricing, in an economy like ours, it always has a significant.
It has a significant input, but it shouldn't be that significant input. That
because I was just about to ask the subject of pricing and energy production. Do we need to have a rethink now, especially when we're having all these losses in the generation, the transmission, etc.? How do we go about it? These have been said for decades. If I remember the last 2.5 decades.
That?
No, we've always had generational and transmission losses, etc. How do we keep all these?
You see, it's got to do with the source of generation. The source of generation is what creates a lot of these problems. So, Akosombo, there's no water in it. Can you generate electricity? When Nigeria sneezed small, did we have light? The source of generation should be something we should look at. Reserve margin. Do we have reserve margin today?
No, we don't.
We don't.
We've not had for...
We have not.
I think for a couple of years.
The other thing is the maintenance of these generation plants. When Tigo goes off once, the whole country, Tico goes off once, the whole country is in darkness. These are the things we should look at and make sure that when these things are happening, it doesn't affect the people directly.
How do we have a rethink then? We don't seem to have the strategy right, and we don't seem to communicate what the strategy should be.
Planning. Planning involves thinking. Planning.
So you're saying we don't have thinking?
We don't plan, please.
How can you
we don't plan. If we were to plan, we would have a national development plan today.
Okay. There's always a subject.
Priorities.
There's always a subject of energy and utilization that, well, I have been always thinking, and I'm sure you have also espoused it. How would it be? And you have been talking about how perhaps we need to prioritize and say industry take care of perhaps energy from hydro, and significantly that should be the objective. So even though consumers would not have energy, we'll still have it for industry so the economy moves forward. How do we make sure then we use other sources of energy for communities, for example? So we have Adabraka, they have a pool of solar generating panels, etc. I don't know how it works though, but in the technical sense.
It works very well. You see,
because I know in some countries
I think when you talk about solar, you talk about Germany. Because I was telling somebody...
In Holland, for example, they have the windmills and all that.
Most of them are now, they don't use it anyway. But when you talk about solar deployment, you talk about Germany. You don't talk about the Middle Eastern countries. And I'll tell you why. It's a very sensitive subject. But now we have the solar cells, very, very efficient. But when you produce to store and using the storage, that is the biggest cost in solar deployment. The batteries are very expensive. You need large number of batteries. And when you even store 100, let's say megawatts, you can only bring out maybe 40 or 50 because the batteries are not that very efficient. So what have they done in Germany? You produce your solar and you feed it into the system with reversible meters. That's all. So every house can be producing energy in Ghana, but they are not storing it. They are using it. So that when it gets into the night, that the solar cells cannot work or something, we use the national, because we would have saved a lot of energy during the daytime. And you use it. So in Germany, some houses get checks from the electricity distributor because they are producing into the system, feeding into the system more than they are taking out of the system. That is what we should start thinking about, not solar. That's why when you go to Middle East now, the biggest solar and the most exciting solar project they are doing is concentrated solar. They are using concave mirrors to concentrate and distribute because it's not efficient.
I've read significantly about them. Yeah.
So when my uncle says think, as a man thinketh, so is he. We don't think. If you can't think, you can't plan. That's all. That's all.
Every time I push the back to you, because you are the MPs, you're the top political leaders, and so the thinking should be coming from your direction.
There's not a single country that, even with the best MPs, it is not the executive. Leadership matters. And the drivers is the executive arm of
What should be our strategy for energy to make sure that sustainably we use other sources in such a way that overall what we generate countrywide is beneficial to key sectors and everybody is satisfied?
The first thing is planning.
Yeah, you've talked about that.
Yes, but it's part of it. it's an integral part of it. Go to Israel today. Every house has a solar panel on it. And even if that house is not using it to generate electricity for light, at least hot water. Every hospital has a solar panel on it. They use to generate hot water for the hospital. Don't you think we will save a lot of megawatts if we were to do that here? Look, we have gated communities now in certain areas. So we can say, for want of a better area, Labone, or even
no area, even a town like Nima can have a solar. It doesn't matter.
Every house,
and you see, every place.
And you see one thing I believe governments should do, especially, and this is by the side, especially where Nima is concerned. We need to be able to plan Nima well. Break the whole place down.
Yeah, because countries do it.
Plan it
Brazil
well.
has done it.
Not only Brazil, you go to Egypt.
And you know why?
And you know why? Old Cairo is making way for new Cairo.
And you know why? At the present moment, a lot of electricity wastage, illegal connections and all that comes from that area. So what do? You plan the place, and those people who you have displaced, you bring them back once you plan the place.
Uncle, I'm not cutting you short. When under a certain government, Nima was supposed to be broken down. That's how we got Medina. You can ask the history in this country. Most of the families that have houses in Nima have houses in Medina. Because like he was saying, under a certain government, it was planned to be phased out, to be broken down. So they built a new resettlement. But Ghana, we don't follow through things. We don't plan. There's no long-term plan in this country. There's no long-term plan.
That has to be done. So when do we do that then?
When do we do that?
Long-term plan.
Political will.
Leadership.
Political will. I keep saying.
How do we achieve that when it's always about NDC and NPP and CPP?
It's the people. It's the people. If you don't educate your people well enough for them to understand what the issues are, that is what happens. It becomes a slinging match between political parties. And it serves the political parties very well. Because the people, they don't understand what it is we want. I can pay you 5,000 votes for me.
83 to 93, there was no MPP, there was no NDC, there was no CPP. What happened to this country? We probably went more bankrupt than anything. In 1979, before Liman was removed as a government, Ghana's economy was over 5 billion. Look at the present day value of 5 billion in 79. Before that government that removed Liman's government left power in 2000, Ghana's economy was 3 billion. It tells you how we have wasted time and effort and generation. We've lost a whole generation in this country to bad governance and bad leadership.